June 14th, 1944, just outside St. Lo, Normandy. The fields are still wet with dawn mist, and the smell of diesel hangs low over the hedgerows. In the half-light, Oberfeldwebel Karl Reinhardt of Panzer Regiment 6 crouches beside the smoking wreck of an American M4 Sherman his crew knocked out barely an hour earlier. The metal is still warm. The ammo inside continues to crackle faintly, tiny pops like distant firecrackers. Karl wipes soot off his gloves, glancing toward his gunner with a grim little smirk. Another Sherman down, another delay in the American advance. But as the sun climbs and the sounds of movement ripple through the countryside, Karl hears something he does not expect. Not the cautious shuffle of infantry, not the snarl of a panther turret turning. Instead, from across the fields, beyond the hedgerows, past the lines of splintered trees, comes the unmistakable rumble of engines. Not one or two, dozens. At first, he assumes it must be a new wave of Shermans arriving from the beachhead. The Americans have plenty, after all. But then he notices the direction. The noise is coming from the rear of the battlefield, not the front. A strange pattern, like a whole column moving in reverse. Moments later, a pair of American M31 tank recovery vehicles crawl into view. Their silhouettes look nothing like combat machines. Heavy booms, thick winch cables, crews waving to infantry as they roll right up to the still-burning Sherman hull. Without hesitation, without even slowing, the recovery crews begin their work. Flames are extinguished with practiced motions. Cables are hooked around the turret ring. A damaged track is thrown aside like a broken toy. Karl watches, confused, as these rear-echelon Americans behave with the calm confidence of men fixing a tractor, not a tank struck in combat only minutes before. There is no panic, no anxiety, no sense of danger. Just efficiency, precision, rhythm. And then it hits him. This is not an isolated team. Behind them, more machines appear. Repair trucks, welders, supply jeeps, stacked with spare bogey wheels, crates of fresh transmissions, and teams of mechanics who look disturbingly fresh despite the chaos around them. They move as if they've done this 1,000 times. Karl glances back at the smoldering Sherman his crew proudly destroyed. Suddenly, it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like swatting a mosquito in a swarm. Because the tank they disabled this morning might be back in the fight by afternoon. And German command has no idea the Americans can do this. The realization is only beginning. By noon, Karl will witness something that shatters every assumption the Wehrmacht held about American armor, and forces German officers to reconsider the entire campaign. By midday, the clouds hanging over St. Lo begin to break, spilling sunlight onto the maze of hedgerows. The battlefield is a patchwork of craters, burnt-out trucks, and broken branches. But for Karl Reinhardt, none of that matters anymore. His eyes stay fixed on the scene unfolding just 300 meters away, where the American recovery teams have transformed chaos into a workshop. One of the M31 crews finishes hooking the disabled Sherman to a tow bar. The turret, half melted from the internal fire, is lifted slightly with a hydraulic winch. Mechanics swarm the hull like bees, shouting measurements, checking weld lines, and replacing shattered bogies with pre-greased ones pulled from crates. Karl can barely believe what he's seeing. The Americans are not salvaging the tank. They're repairing it right here, in the open, on ground the Germans shelled earlier that morning. Meanwhile, German infantry nearby mutter among themselves. Some think these repair crews must be insane. Others think it's an elaborate deception. But then more equipment arrives. Mobile machine shops mounted on trucks, compressors, welding rigs, and even a small crane vehicle. The field now looks less like a war zone and more like an industrial pit stop. The reason becomes clear when Sergeant Bill Haskins of the U.S. 3rd Armored Division steps down from a jeep, clipboard tucked under his arm. He moves from crew to crew, checking off tasks with calm detachment. His division had trained for this exact situation back in England. Rapid armor turnover, battlefield triage, and mobile depot operations designed to push tanks back into combat faster than the enemy could react. For Bill, this is routine. For Carl, it is madness. Across the hedgerow, more Sherman tanks roll by, their engines humming steadily despite mud clinging to their tracks. These are replacements, tanks already repaired that morning or freshly delivered from the rear. They pass the wreck Carl destroyed earlier without even slowing, as if acknowledging that nothing on the German side can stop this momentum. But the moment that truly breaks Carl's confidence comes when one recovery vehicle lowers a restored powertrain into the Sherman's engine compartment. The mechanics step back. The crew chief signals. The engine sputters, coughs, then roars back to life. The same tank Carl's crew killed just hours ago now sits upright, idling confidently, like a resurrected beast, hungry to return to the line. Smoke puffs lightly from its exhaust, not from damage, but from readiness. Carl feels a cold weight settle in his chest. How do you defeat an enemy whose machines refuse to stay dead? But this is only the surface. Carl is witnessing only one repair team, one tiny piece of a much larger system. The real shock is coming next. Because behind the hedgerows, hidden from German eyes, lies the heart of America's armored miracle, and it's far larger, faster, and more terrifying than anything Carl has seen so far. Late that afternoon, as distant artillery thumps across the Normandy bocage, Karl Reinhardt is marched with other German prisoners toward the American rear. Dust kicks up around their boots. The air smells of oil, hot metal, and churned soil. He expects to see a typical supply area, maybe tents, fuel dumps, medical stations. Instead, as the column turns a corner past a shattered orchard, Karl slows to a halt. Spread across the fields in front of him is a sight no Wehrmacht soldier had ever imagined. A fully operational mobile armored repair depot, sprawling like a small town built overnight. Lines of Sherman hulls sit organized by damage type. Turrets are stacked on wooden blocks. Cranes swing steel arms overhead. Welding torches hiss. Generators hum. Mechanics jog between workstations carrying gearboxes or fuel pumps like factory workers on a production line. It feels industrial, not military. And that is exactly the point. The U.S. Army had studied the brutal tank losses of North Africa and Sicily. They knew war was not just won by tactics, but by availability. By how many tanks could be made operational at any moment. So they designed these mobile depots to mirror Detroit's assembly lines, modular, efficient, redundant. If one machine shop fell behind, another picked up the slack. If a mechanic was injured, 3 men replaced him. If a Sherman lost its turret, the depot simply swapped it out from stock. Carl watches a damaged Sherman being pulled into a bay. The turret is removed, the engine hoisted out, and a fresh transmission lowered in, all in under 15 minutes. Nearby, supply trucks unload crates filled with pre-lubricated road wheels, track links, and entire differential housings wrapped in waxed paper. Nothing here is repaired slowly. Everything is repaired now. A POW beside Carl mutters that even German factories don't run this smoothly. Another compares it to watching machines fixing machines. Carl says nothing. The truth is, he feels sick. He realizes that while German tank crews might be able to destroy a Sherman, they cannot destroy American industry. And here, on this muddy patch of Normandy farmland, that industry is rolling toward them like a tidal wave. Then he sees something that seals his dread. A tank he swears he recognizes, same scorch mark near the rear hull, same bent fender, is being fitted with new tracks. The tank his crew destroyed this morning. The crew chief pats the armor affectionately, signaling to his men as if greeting an old friend returning from a quick break. Carl's throat tightens. It is one thing to face a tank on the battlefield. It is another to face one that keeps standing back up. But the Americans are not finished. The next revelation is the one that will force German officers across Normandy to rewrite their battle assumptions, abandon defensive plans, and confront a reality they are completely unprepared for. Because what Carl sees next is not a repair facility. It is preparation for something far more decisive. As evening settles over Normandy, long shadows stretch across the depot. The generators hum steadily. Mechanics move with practiced rhythm. And then Carl notices a subtle shift. Sections of the depot are no longer repairing damaged vehicles. They're staging them. Freshly restored Shermans sit in neat rows, engines idling with soft rhythmic thumps. Tank commanders chat casually beside them, helmets still dusty from the morning's fighting. Ammunition trucks pull up, crews efficiently restocking the turrets with 75mm shells and belts of 30 cal rounds. Fuel tankers snake through the lines, topping off each machine in preparation for immediate orders. This isn't a repair facility at all. This is a launch pad. Captain Robert Willis of the 3rd Armored Division walks across the staging area with a map tucked under his arm. His officers gather around a mobile command tent where electric lights glow against the canvas walls. Their goal is simple: exploit any German weakness before nightfall. With Shermans returning to service faster than German units can even report their losses, the Americans can press wherever they choose. Carl's heart sinks as he realizes what that means. Every tank his side destroys only delays the Americans for a few hours. Every tactical German victory evaporates before command can adjust. The battlefield is no longer governed by who shoots Streeter or who holds the high ground. It's governed by the speed of replacement, by logistics that the Wehrmacht simply cannot match. And then the engines surge. Dozens of Shermans, some fresh from the factory, others resurrected from the morning's wreckage, roll forward together. Their silhouettes rise like a steel wave moving toward the front. The ground trembles beneath Carl's boots. Dust clouds billow behind the departing columns. Mechanics slap the hulls affectionately as they pass, already preparing their tools for the next round of casualties that will arrive by nightfall. To Carl, the sound is overwhelming, not just loud, inevitable. He imagines German officers frantically redrawing lines on maps, trying to calculate tank attrition, unaware that the math is already broken. He imagines a Panther crew celebrating a kill, only to face the same Sherman later that day. He imagines the Wehrmacht fighting not just an army, but a factory that never sleeps. A young American mechanic nearby wipes grease from his hands, watching the tanks depart. He murmurs to a fellow crewman, half joking, half proud, "Give us a few hours, and we'll bring twice as many back tomorrow." Karl closes his eyes. For the first time since landing in France, he understands the truth. Germany isn't losing because its tanks are inferior or its soldiers lack courage. Germany is losing because the United States can rebuild faster than the Wehrmacht can destroy. And in war, that kind of power decides everything.